Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear brothers and sisters, Zubair Kareem again. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. This is lecture number 6 in the series of lectures I was trying to deliver for subject of Islamic finance and particularly the Riba. I hope you have gone through previous lectures, especially the number 4 and 5, but also the previous ones, because without knowing the overall approach, there might be difficulty understanding the whole concept and my approach. My basic purpose of delivering this lecture was to talk about Riba, which is probably one of the most complex concept in Islam. It should not be that way, but it has been made that way and practiced in that manner, making it quite complicated. And at the same time, it is presented to the community in a very simplified version, which for example, it is, if you read book of translation, it is almost always nowadays is translated, the word riba in the Quran is translated as interest, but that I have, as I talked about in my previous lecture, that it has created many problems and it did not make full sense when we look at the evidence available to us in the Quran and the Hadith. Now, briefly speaking, if we look at the whole set of information available to us in the Quran and we look at it as a package, we reach at a point where we understand riba as a term riba, which implies financial injustice. And I stated that the most important words of the Quran about this concept or the riba were 4 words of Surah Al-Baqarah, I think ayah number 278 or 279, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade the riba, and then in the middle of that ayah stated, La tazlimuna wa la tuzlamun, that while that is happening, riba contracts are ending and both parties are taking their money or assets. So the rule of that would be La tazlimuna wa la tuzlamun. No injustice would happen to either party, neither to the lender or the borrower. Those are the key critical pieces of the Quran, basically describing that justice would prevail, which is always the fundamental concept between humans whenever they deal with each other at multiple levels. And as in Islam, justice never really comes alone. It is always comes with mercy. Adl always comes with ihsan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right away after that stated an ayah, which is basically the concept of ihsan or mercy, as I talked about in my last lecture. And then we went into Hadith literature, and there they were practical examples of how we would use this understanding of fundamental concept and how we would figure out if a transaction has riba or not. And I particularly provided you some examples, and if you could particularly remember the example of Hazrat Bilal Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu and Rasul Akram, and I don't want to repeat that, but that was a very important hadith to understand this concept on a practical level. And I stated that once we understand the fundamental principle behind riba, we can look at any transaction or any contract, and then we can figure out if there is riba in that contract or not, in that transaction or not, as we all understand that financial transactions can happen in so many different ways, and there could be so many different forms, and each and everything could be different. But at the end of the day, if we understand the fundamental concept, it would be easier to understand. And I ended my last lecture stating that I would talk about a simplified framework which can be used to figure out what is, how do we deal with this. As I stated that the hadith of Rasul Akram and Hazrat Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu provided only the information. We did not have any more information about that, and we have to use that type of information to formulate a concept for us to understand within each other and to our next generations, and to tell them how to avoid riba. Now I'm directly going to go into that concept of framework. To understand that, I want you to pay attention and learn two terms. Two important terms are one should know, and they are easy to understand. And then I would tell you a story, an interesting story, because stories are always easy way to understand different concepts. I don't want to repeat the hadith of which I just quoted. I would rather give you a different made-up story so that you could understand this concept. I have used this same strategy to explain concept of Islamic banking, and the same strategy to understand concept of Sharia bench and then Islamic banking and their perspective. And now I'm going to talk about this concept of fundamental simple framework to understand riba. And even for that, I would tell you a story. But before that, I want you to learn two terms. The first term to learn is what has been described in literature as darar, with dod, darar. The root word is an Arabic concept, darar. The root word for that is dar. Dar means harm or injury. And in this concept, darar means a financial harm or injury, or rather, for this concept, it would be an avoidable financial harm or injury. So darar is an avoidable financial harm or injury. Harm or injury in financial term means loss, basically. So avoidable financial or economic loss is darar. One more time. Avoidable financial loss is darar. Obviously, in a business, losses can happen and not all of them can be avoided. But what we are talking about is avoidable. That is the key word. Avoidable financial or economic loss is darar. That's one concept. The second concept to understand, which is so unique to Islamic understanding of riba, and so interesting also, is called gharar, with the ghain, gharar. The first one was darar. This one is gharar. Now, the term gharar is avoidable financial uncertainty. Avoidable financial uncertainty or doubt. So the first term is darar, which is avoidable financial loss. And the second term is gharar, which is avoidable financial uncertainty or doubt. So in a very simple way to understand that would be, if everybody is selling a product at $5 a pound and one shop is selling at $7 a pound, well, the products are same, that this shop that is selling at $7 a pound, and if they do a transaction or sell to someone, there is a darar in it. There is a darar in it. Avoidable financial loss in it, while this buyer can easily have gone to other places in the market and buy that. But this person charged $2 more, that is avoidable. How can it be avoided? Like in the hadith of Rasul Akram and Hazrat Bilal, that person could have just gone to a different shop in the market and buy that. So going to open market can avoid that sometime. Going to open market can avoid. So one way, easy way to avoid that would be going to open market and then see. Now that's financial harm, avoidable financial harm, and I would talk more about it in my story. The second one is avoidable financial doubt. To simply understand that, let's say you're making a deal with a bank, and the application process in every other bank is straightforward and simple and easy to understand. But one bank is making it so complex that you don't really understand. You take it home and even nobody understands. You take to your sheikh and they say, I don't know, but they probably are saying true. So that doubt in it, that's gharar. That's gharar. So what is riba? Riba is any transaction which has either gharar or darar or both. So riba is any transaction or a contract which has either darar, which is avoidable financial loss, or gharar, which is avoidable financial doubt, or both. And I explain I was explaining hadith of Hazrat Bilal with Rasul Akram, that Rasul Akram stopped Hazrat Bilal to do things in a particular way because the way he was doing it had chances of both darar and gharar, and he told him to do things in a different way so that both could be avoided, so the riba could be avoided. So let me give you a story, a brief stories to make things a little bit interesting so that we could understand. That was, sometimes people think that was hadith of 1400 years ago and now the time has changed. So how do we apply this to today's life? So I thought I would give you a story of today's life. So we just finished Eid al-Fitr, alhamdulillah, and in a few weeks' time, Hajj is going to happen, inshallah. And after Hajj, Hajis and other Muslims all around the globe would look for animals for slaughtering or sacrifice. So this would be one day when a lot of people like me who usually don't deal with animals would go to market maybe and try to buy an animal. So they would make a financial transaction that day. So I thought I could use that to give you an example. Let's say, for the sake of this example, that we are in Pakistan. Just for the sake of this example, we are in Pakistan, and the average price of a sheep in Pakistan, or let's say a goat in Pakistan, most people would buy goats in Pakistan. So one average price of a goat in Pakistan, let's say, for sake of this example, is 100,000 rupees. 100,000 rupees, that's the average price. Some goats, because most of those goats are raised for this purpose, they're brought to the market at a certain age, so they're about same age, they're about same weight, but some are a little bit smaller than other ones, and some are bigger. So the average price is 100,000, but some goat might be 95,000, some might be 105. So at the end, average price is 100,000. So between 95 to 105 is the fair price of a goat. Now, let's say a person like me goes to the market who has been told by his friends that he should be careful, and he should be careful that people might charge him more. And while he is going toward the market, on his way, there is a man who is there, and he has a couple of goats with him, and he said that I'm selling goats, and I haven't reached the market yet, but this man has few goats, and I look at him, and the man is willing to sell. And when I ask him what is the price of a goat, and he looks at me, and he understands that I probably don't have enough experience in this kind of thing, so he tells me that he would make a special deal for me, and he would give me a goat at $150,000, 150,000 rupees. Like I told you, the average price of a goat is 100,000. So he said that the price of a goat would be 150. Now, because I have been told by my friends that people might cheat me, or so I should try to lower the price. So I talked to this man and said, "Listen, this is too much. So you have to. This is not fair price or whatever." We talked for a few minutes, few deals here and there, and at the end, what happens? The man tells me, okay, he would make a special case for me because I look like a nice man. I said, okay, he would sell the goat to me at 120,000. And now I am I am also kind of inside satisfied that I brought the price down to by 30,000, and he is behaving in that way that he did a special favor to me. So he sells me the goat at 120,000. That's one way this could happen. Now, before I analyze this, I would provide you two other ways, and then we will talk. The second way is that in the market there comes a car. It's a huge official looking car, and come out of this car are two people who who go to a vendor, and they know animal prices. They are completely aware of what is the full price, and it's an open market, and everybody's selling at about average price of 100,000. So that kind of cheating is not possible. So these men, they go and tell a vendor that they wanted a goat for, and they were there to buy this goat for Minister of Agriculture, let's say. They are buying for Minister of Agriculture, and because his family wanted a goat for sacrifice. So this vendor, knowing who he was selling, he says, "Well, here is a goat." He brings the best goat from his group of goats, and then he says that this goat is 80,000 rupees, and he tells them that he made a, though this goat is about 105,000, but he made a special deal for the minister. So tell minister that this is for him. So these two guys who came from minister's home, they're also very happy. So they give him 80,000, and they go home and are supposed to tell minister that they made a special deal with this guy, and he's a nice guy, and he gave them a goat in 80,000 rupees. That's the second thing that could happen. The third thing that could happen is that market ends. This is the last day before next day is Eid al-Adha, and most of the goats are already sold, and there is a guy who was always procrastinating, not sure if he was going to buy it, but at the end he decided he was going to buy it. So even at the Maghrib time and maybe later, he goes to the market and notices, well, there's nobody there. The traders are gone, vendors are gone, and most of the goats are gone. So he can't just find a goat. So there is a vendor there standing and tells him that what he's looking for. He said, well, sorry, I'm late, but I was looking for a goat. Now, this guy though he's late, but he is just and a respected man. And the vendor, let's assume, is also a just and a respected man. And he says, though there is no goat here, but there are more goats I have at home. And he tells him that the average price of goat today was 95 to 105. So the average price becomes 100,000. So I will send my servant to your home, and the goat would be delivered tonight, but the price would be 100,000. And the man is very happy that he did a favor to him. So a special favor. So he gave him 100,000. He trusts him. And let's assume that an hour, 2 hours later, this vendor delivers a goat to this man's house, and like any other goat of that day, in 100,000. Now let's analyze these three transactions and look at the rules we stated. And the rule of riba would be that any transaction that has either darar, which is avoidable financial loss, or gharar, which is avoidable financial doubt or uncertainty, is riba, or both. If a transaction has both, definitely that is riba too. So let's look at these three transactions. So the first transaction happened when I was going to the market on my way. I didn't have access to market yet, and somebody sold me a goat at 120,000 rupees. Well, it is clear that if I had gone to the market, the price of that goat would have been 100,000, or maybe 95, or 100,000 max, or maybe max 105. So the man basically got 15,000 or 20,000 more just because I was not in the market. So this is a financial loss that could have been easily avoided by me going to the market. That's avoidable financial loss in this transaction. The same loss that Rasul Akram told Hazrat Bilal to avoid, that this avoidable financial loss or darar in this transaction, make this transaction riba transaction, and that vendor, whoever sold me that goat, would be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His whatever he thought he made money out of it, that 15,000, but that money would not bring any mercy or blessing for him or her. So that's one example. The second example I provided to you is that the car stopped in the market, in the open market, and a goat was sold to them at 80,000, while the fair price of that goat probably was 100,000. So the goat was sold at 20,000 rupees less, and the man sold that goat because people who were buying that goat belonged to Minister of Agriculture, where this guy potentially could have gotten some favor for his business. Now that is again riba, because especially in the Quran, if you remember ayah number 39 of Surah Al-Rum, where it was specifically stated that you do not do that. That's commercial bribery. That is riba again. So in terms of our rules, darar and gharar, well, definitely it is a financial loss to the vendor. And Islam does not accept that either. That it was easily avoidable by following the market. He did not follow the market price, so he purposefully reduced that price to gain some benefit. That is also riba, because it has darar in it. It has darar in it. In fact, it also has gharar in it because it is not clear why he did it. He definitely had ulterior motives that makes the whole transaction doubtful. So this transaction has both gharar and darar in it. So this transaction has riba. It is invalid according to Islam. Now the last transaction is when a person went to the market and could not find a goat and paid 100,000, and both the person who is buying it and the other person who is selling it are sincere, honest people. They are not cheating each other. They don't have no intention of cheating each other. So the vendor is doing a favor to him, send the goat at 100,000. Now, according to Islam, that transaction also is invalid. That transaction has gharar. It does not have darar, but it has gharar in it. How? Let's assume that the goat came in the evening, and the person who got it, he had never seen that goat before. Of course, he never inspected it. His neighbor comes and he looks at the goat and says, how much you paid for it? And he said 100,000. Well, it doesn't look like 100,000. To me, it looks like it should have been maybe 80,000 rupees. He said, why? Well, I was in the market and those goats were different and this looks smaller. Now, whatever it is, a doubt has been created in this buyer's mind. That doubt can easily be created in this buyer's mind, where he might think that he was cheated. He was cheated. This thing, which is a potential uncertainty and doubt, Islam does not accept it. That is gharar. So according to Islam, he should not have bought that goat without inspecting it, number one, and ideally in the market so that he could compare. So the first example I gave when somebody sold me a goat at 120,000 had the rar in it, that makes it riba. The second transaction, which the goat was sold at 80,000 rupees instead of 100,000, has both the rar for the seller and gharar in the transaction. That makes it riba transaction. And the last one has gharar in it, making it riba transaction. Another example of, for example, famous example quoted in the hadith of, and there are few others, of gharar transaction is that the Arabs used to buy, people buy animals from each other, but sometimes Arabs would go, and if a she camel was pregnant, they would make a deal, and the deal would be that I want to buy baby of that she camel, whatever baby comes out, and they said that somebody would buy it and pay for it whatever price and say whatever baby comes, that's mine. Now Islam does not accept that. Rasul Akram said that is transaction with gharar, doubt in it. Don't do it. You only do it when the baby is born. Because, of course, somebody has already paid for it, but there is no certainty the baby would even be born, number one, or born live, number two, and if the baby would be healthy or not. So according to Islamic understanding of finance, all these things should be done when the baby is delivered and examined and witnessed, then you buy it. Otherwise, it carries significant gharar in it, doubt in it, and Rasul Akram stayed away. There is a straight hadith that you do not make a transaction that has gharar in it. So basically, concept of riba is any transaction which has either darar in it, which is avoidable financial loss, or gharar in it, which is avoidable financial uncertainty in it. So let's look at home financing contract. In America, you go to a local bank and everything is in black and white and open, because in America there are laws which says that truth in lending practices, which means basically that the bank has to be completely truthful, and also the buyer has to be completely truthful. When the buyer, by that I mean that the buyer has to filling out application, he or she has to be completely truthful with their income and all that, but the bank also has to be completely truthful. And by that I mean that they have to be completely straight how much they're going to charge for the money they are lending, and they have to specify to the customer all the fees and the charges, truth in lending practices. So because of that, in America, home financing contracts is in black and white, straightforward, and can easily be understood. But if you compare that home financing contract, let's say even in America, to an Islamic institution in America, an Islamic institution or finance institution in America providing a similar contract, first of all, they are almost always more expensive for the customer. Number two, they usually have higher or more fees. But at the end of the day, the customer ends up paying more money. So that makes those contracts that makes them having darar in it, avoidable financial harm in it. While the customer could have easily gone to the other bank and where everything was in black and white and clear and no doubt about it. So, fundamentally, the fee structure and an overall cost was little bit less. So usually Islamic financial institutions have higher cost, and that is darar. And the second thing is, if you look at Islamic financial contracts, Islamic financial institutions, home financing contracts, there are things in it which I talked about in my previous lectures. that they are so difficult to understand, and especially this concept of trust and all that business, that the buyer is confused that what exactly is happening. That on one hand you're charging me more money, on the other hand you're saying this is not interest. You're telling me that that bank is, whatever they are charging is interest, whatever you are charging is calling a markup or something, but at the end of the day a customer does not find much difference. This is all gharar. This is all gharar. So, in fact, the contract in America, written by as a typical Islamic institution, in comparison to, and let's say Bank of America or any other institution, if I compare both, the Islamic institution usually has darar in it, even if it is small amount, and definitely gharar in it, which makes this contract having more problem than that contract, Islamically speaking. Because having darar and gharar is the definition of a contract having riba. So this is a fundamental paradox that people don't pay attention to. And the reason people don't want to talk about it and don't pay attention to, because of this fixation of this concept that this bank is saying, no, this is not interest, this is markup. And I have talked enough about that concept already. And I don't want to repeat that, but bottom line is that if you look at a home financing contract, that's where I started. I do not see that the home financing contract provided by Islamic banks, even in Pakistan, I provided you example that Mizan Bank's financial contract, in their rate was 24.4%. I don't know what it is today. 24.4%. Man, that is just and is that less than the bank or any other bank? I haven't explored that, but probably it's going to be either same or maybe a little bit more. But bottom line is that is what they're charging, though they're not calling it interest. Now, what is the key then to deal with this whole situation? The first is to really understand in easy terms that what riba is. Again, in any transaction or a contract, riba is where you find darar, which is avoidable financial loss, and gharar, which is avoidable financial uncertainty. And if you find that, that contract has riba, and that should be avoided. And I would provide some examples of that. And so let me give you some examples of that. But before I go there, I want to briefly say something about loan, especially Qarde Hasna loan without any charge. See, the thing is, I wanted to know exactly what is the origin, documented origin in Islamic literature, where it is documented that nothing can be charged on a loan. Nothing can be charged on a loan. Now, I found a reference in Al-Muwatta, again, first book of hadith of Imam Malik Raziallahu Ta'ala. In that book, there is a narration which stated that people in Medina of that time, this was their understanding, that when they lend money to each other, they did not put a condition that additional amount would be charged. But if somebody gave a gift, they took it. Now, that was their understanding of, I would say, justice. As according to Surah Al-Baqarah, the rule was La tazlimuna wa la tuzlamun. That was their understanding of that time. But I raised the question, is that fair? Is that really just? If somebody is buying a home today and asking a bank to finance it in $500,000, are we saying that we are not going to pay anything on it? I mean, fairly speaking, people try to manipulate this question in a different way, that you should not take a loan and make a deal different way. But bottom line is, at the end of the day, you are not paying that 500,000. You're living in that house, and somebody else is paying to the builder. So at the end of the day, loan is happening. So, but can there be a loan which is free? Yes, because like I stated, that in Islam, adl is never alone. Adl always comes with ihsan. Justice always comes with mercy. So when people are lending to friends, to family members, and even if a rich person wants to lend to other people free of charge, they should not charge anything on it. That is their ihsan. It is remember that the preferred way is justice, but sometimes ihsan is preferred, especially in those situations where we are lending to family members and friends and people who are really, I would say, in need. Let's say somebody got sick, has a condition that could easily be treated by spending $20,000, and he doesn't have $20,000. So lending him $20,000 free of interest definitely is ihsan. So at the same time, if somebody wants to buy an automobile for $20,000, that's a whole different example. Then it becomes a commercial transaction, and in that, justice has to prevail. Now, when I say the justice has to prevail, what I'm implying is that the loan, every commercial loan, is going to have a price. So when societies would try to figure out what is the fair price, what they can do, American society does it in one way, but this is by the way, a different subject and worthy of a lecture, but I would briefly touch it here, just to give you a little bit of perspective on it. In my example of home financing, where the builder built a house and was charging $500,000 on it, $500,000. What if that builder, instead of giving you the money, lending you the money, that builder has invested that money? What could have happened to that money in 30 years? Because in a way, he's giving you that money for 30 years and slowly getting it back. So what if the builder has put that money and slowly put that money in an investment, and 500,000, and the question was, what would be the return? That would be one way, one just way to look at it. So let me just give you an example that I just reviewed this online, that return on investment in America for last 100 years, return on investment, if somebody invested in mutual funds or stocks, which is basically investing in companies, in businesses. If somebody invested in last 100 years, overall percentage of income was about 9.5%, 9.5% per year, 9.5%. But if you adjust that to inflation, it becomes about 6.5%. So the same builder, if he could just invest his money, even adjusted to inflation, he or she could have made 6.5% on that amount of money. Of course, some years it would go down and some year it would go up, but I am talking about the record of last 100 years or more, and that these are the numbers. And these numbers are going in same direction. They're following the same pattern. So that would be one fair way to look at it. What could be the fair amount on a loan? And that's so interesting that even when we look at it in American financing and home financing issues, when our rates are about 4-5% or less, buyers are very happy. When our rates are about 5-6% or 5 to 7%, both parties are very happy. But if the rate goes beyond 7%, then the buyers are not happy. So it is so interesting that the rule of the statistics and averages applies, can easily be understood that way too. So a fair amount looking at American experience, and every society has to figure this out. And I believe that Islamic scholars and Islamic, especially academic economic economists who understand religion and economics can easily figure out a system where where it could be decided what is the fair return on investment that one could charge, and they could, a formula could be made, an Islamic formula could be made based upon that. Banks can figure out what is a fair way, just like in the West or all over the world, because most of the world follows the same principles. LIBOR is used, London interbanking rate is used in a way to figure out return on investment. That is the benchmark, first benchmark, and then they are on top of that other benchmark. So the Islamic institution and Islamic societies can figure out a benchmark which would follow Islamic principle of economics and investment. But I am giving you an example of American experience, which seems quite fair, that in the last 100 years, adjusted to inflation, rate of return is about 6+%. So if a bank is charging 6+%, that would be justified. If it is charging less than that, well, that's good that the customer had as a good price in that day's market. And if bank charges more than 7-8%, that is again becomes unattractive to customers because that is too much money. So I provided you a little bit of snapshot of how a loan could be made just following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's principle, la tazlimuna wa la tuzlimun, instead of just giving a blanket statement that all interest, all additional amount is wrong, because Islamic banks and Islamic institutions do not follow what they say. They are charging on whatever they provide. Bank of Iran charges 18%, Mizan Bank charges 24+%. Now, before I go into specific examples, I would say Muslim societies are so ill prepared or not prepared for complicated economics. I would say when I look at Pakistani society, and even when I look at example of Middle East, what Middle East has done, especially Dubai, that they have found a niche, basically using, I didn't really talk about it, but using a particular, basically relatively unknown fatwa of long time ago. They designed a system and declared that as Islamic banking system. And just like that organic mango shop declared that their shop was different. So they are declaring that their bank or Islamic banking is different, but at the end of the day, it is not. In fact, it is sometimes it is charging more. So similarly, when I look at Islamic institutions in the Middle East or Islamic institution in Pakistan, I'm not an economist or a banker, but even I can see that they are so ill prepared for the complexities of modern banking systems, number one. And number two, when I look at the religion and understanding the religion and what Quran and the Hadith says, what I see is that whatever they are designing is not really following those rules. So they have to really think hard and reflect on what they are doing. Now, whatever they would design, whatever a government would design, whatever a government of Pakistan would design, it has to be implemented or regulated from the government. It should not be in the hands of individuals, a group of individuals like Sharia advisors or Sharia advisory boards, because they have serious conflict of interest. And also, you never wanted to delegate veto power of that huge economic or financial decisions to one person or few people. It should be why the government level regulations are important, and because they would provide justice to everyone. They would provide justice to everyone. When small group of people try to decide, they always tend to favor their decisions to small group of people, and I would provide those examples too. Now, Muslim societies are not really ready for open-ended or unrestricted loans. Open-ended or unrestricted loans. They are not ready to talk about. Here, I'm mostly going to talk about, that's why I use the example of home financing loan, which has a collateral. Collateral is the house. Or auto financing, where the collateral is the automobile. Or a project financing, where the collateral could be the bridge or the dam or the roads where the toll could be collected. So these things always have a collateral. I didn't really much talk about unrestricted loans, which is a classic example is credit card loan, which is unrestricted loan, meaning you give a commercial loan to someone for he or she can use it in any way they like. That is unrestricted loan. Islamic societies are not ready at this point, in my opinion, to really allow unrestricted loans. So a typical credit card, which is available to people in America, in my opinion, should be restricted in Pakistan, because the society is so ill prepared, and could easily abuse. Even American society, of course, is incurring a tremendous amount of debt because of that type of borrowing. So that type of borrowing is always a slippery slope. But the Muslim society especially should not work on that. So I am not going to talk about that as much. Also, whatever they design, whatever Muslim societies would design, it is very, very important for them to understand ihsan, the mercy clauses in their contracts. Unless those mercy clauses are there, their contracts would be null and void, in my opinion. They would still not be Islamic. So something can easily may have no riba, but still be not fully Islamic. So the contract has to be fully Islamic, and for a financial contract of this nature, mercy clauses have to be there. And the mercy clause would be, if somebody can't pay for some reason, there should be a way out, instead of getting enslaved or harmed physically or emotionally. And if somebody could just not pay, there should be a way out too. All those things should be clearly defined in black and white, so that nobody would abuse anyone. And I have heard even in COVID season that the people who were in Middle East, despite the fact that the Middle East, I was told, has a lot of Islamic banking, a lot of people were abused, even from as simple as auto financing. They were abused and they were threatened because of no fault of their own, because they lost job and couldn't pay the monthly installments. Now let's look at examples where we would look at if these examples have riba or not. And here I stated that the Muslim societies are particularly at fault, that they are not understanding full implications. They are not understanding full understanding of riba. And then because of that, they are not understanding full implications of riba. And knowing that riba is that sin for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that if you indulge in that sin, you're starting a war with him, whose impact would be right away visible on you or the societies. So the first example I'm providing is applicable to both any societies, also in American societies. Most credit card contracts have riba. Why? Because even if I look at an American example, I told you that the fair return on investment on somebody's, if somebody would invest that money in stocks and mutual fund, meaning in business, is little more than 6%, 6.5%. But Average credit card company charges in America about 20%. Some charges a little bit less, and many charges close to 30%. That is that contract has riba. Remember, ayah of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't double, quadruple it, don't do too much. So exactly that what that ayah was saying. But anyway, like I stated, that understand the rule. Remember the rule. If a transaction has darar or gharar in it, well, this transaction has too much darar because why? Because the same money invested somewhere else would give you maybe 6-7%, but why are you charging me 20% or 27%? That is way more. That is gharar. So, sorry, that is darar for the person who is getting credit card, and because of that, almost every credit card loan is laden with riba, and that should be avoided. Of course, if I have credit card, but for out of necessity, because without credit card we cannot do most of the transactions nowadays. But I pay it off every month, alhamdulillah. But if that is doable, then it is fine. Somebody who does not want to have a credit card, you can easily have a debit card and can use the debit card as such. And in Islamic societies should talk about more debit card. And I noted that in Pakistan, that's what they're doing. They are talking more about debit card, which is a wise move, instead of credit card. So the credit card transactions or contracts are full of riba. At the same time, for a bank to charge abusive fees and charges for different loan is riba. So that's why I say that if any bank, and even an Islamic bank, is charging just extravagant fee for the same transaction other banks are not charging, that amount is riba. So of course, in US banking system does not think in terms of riba, they purely think in terms of market and rules and regulations. But in America, there are rules and regulations that you cannot charge excessive amounts. So in other countries where rules or regulations are not that strong, they should, and people tend to be more religious, they should not do it because Islam does not allow. That is riba, because that is darar to the customer. That is avoidable darar to the customer. And why should that customer should pay? The government has to make sure that those things does not happen. Again, I'm talking about that this is not the role of Sharia advisor. This is the role of the government, where the government comes and says that you cannot charge certain amounts, and the charges have to be only some and certain amount. This is a government level decision, not a personal or bank level decision. Next example. It happens quite commonly in a country like Pakistan, or any country who is really struggling financially. You would see these practices. This is so interestingly universal phenomena that a lot of struggling economies, when you go deeper, you would find same kind of problems in them. When a connected or well-connected or a political or in whatever way a connected person get a loan from a bank, many times these are the national bank, meaning the bank belongs to the government, with an intention to not going to pay, meaning somebody in Pakistan, a connected person or a businessman, get a loan of, let's say, $10 million to do whatever, maybe to say that I'm going to start a new factory. And then that person is getting that loan because of the connection. That makes it a riba connection. Why? It is a loss to rest of the society. It is a loss to rest of the society. It is an avoidable loss to rest of the society if that was an open market phenomena, meaning that loan was available to anyone and was given only on merit. That would be fine. But if merit is not followed, then that transaction has riba. Even if that person return it after, let's say that person gets 10 million and say, I'm going to return in a year or two, and those 10 millions, but even that is riba because of, remember that the value of dollar can change, value of wheat can change. So that transaction has riba. And especially if they don't pay it, that definitely is riba. Now I'm going to take you to a very different, simple level, and that is more for, let's say, an understanding of American audience. You go to garage sale, and a garage sale in springtime, spring has just started in our area, and spring and summer garage sales would be all around. It is fine. People are putting outside things that they don't need most of the time, and you go and you get something like a tennis racket I bought in $1 one time, used tennis racket, or a bicycle or something like that. That is fine. But what if I understand value of, let's say, baseball cards? I'm not into baseball, but let's say I understand value of baseball card, and somebody is put a garage sale in that selling baseball card, and one baseball card is there, and he or she is selling those cards at $1 each. And I look at that card, and because I'm aware of value of a particular card, let's say that in one sense I'm aware, and the other sense I'm not aware. I bought that card in $1. I come home, showed it to my friend, my neighbor, and my neighbor said, "Man, where did you get this?" He said, "Well, a garage sale." And he tells me that, did I know that the value of this card is actually almost $10,000? He said, "Man, that is very good." In most of the people in America would think, "Oh, this is very, very good. I made a deal today." But my friend, according to Islamic principles, this transaction has riba. This is a riba transaction. So a Muslim is supposed to not follow through with this deal. Once that he's or she is aware of that, should go back, tell the buyer that this happened mistakenly and he or she didn't know, because it is an avoidable situation. If that person would have gone to open market where the baseball cards are sold, of course those people would have known the real value of it. So making this kind of deal according to Islamic principle is invalid because it has riba in it, because it has avoidable financial loss darar in it. So that's character of being a Muslim, that you do not do it. Next example, which is, I see, I don't know if you ever pay attention to these things in some societies, and I have, because I'm originally from Pakistan, so I have paid attention to those things. And that is that paying unfairly less than what the market price of a product or a crop is financial injustice. For example, what happens in Pakistan, gas in Pakistan we call sui gas, or the gas we use for fuel. That gas comes from a certain area in Pakistan, and that has been delivered to a lot of different areas. But the question is, was that purchased or the compensation given to the local area, was that fair? If that was not based upon fair price, then the whole system and transaction has riba. So whole society in a larger sense has been dealing with riba. Whole government structure that made this possible, they are responsible for that riba. So do you try to understand the implications of that? That so many people are involved, and people who are benefiting, they are not protesting, they are not understanding what is happening, that the gas where it is removed, those areas have to be fairly compensated. This is the same kind of example. for example, diamond mines in South Africa, where Europeans were going and digging, and for Africans, they were telling them these are stones, or they were compensated just like they were digging stones, and in open market they were being sold as diamonds. That is riba, my friend. So this kind of this is avoidable. There are, so the right way to do would be, if any natural resources of that kind is found, you sit with local people where it is found first, talk to them, and make a formal just deal to compensate them, and so that they would continue to sell in future. And that's the way, this is the way things are done even in America. Many people in South have wells going, or oil wells going, even in their own fields, or even in their own backyards, and they are being sold. Nowadays we have even solar panels, which we are doing in this. That example is a little bit different, but using the same principle. So bottom line is that in societies where people are abused, and similarly farmers are abused, their crop is picked up by people and or the government and sold at a much higher price in the city, that is a riba transaction. So that is financial injustice to the farmer, because when we were living a long time ago, I was living in Islamabad in Pakistan, which is the capital. There was a rule in the capital. There used to be a rule in the capital that the farmer cannot bring his crop in the city. So which means that the farmer has to sell crop to some other dealer outside the city, who would bring and make a huge profit. This practice has been specifically outlined by a hadith. And the reason for that is, again, Rasul Akram understood financial injustice and riba. It has riba in it. So the best practice is to allow farmer to come directly in the town to sell its product, or if that is not possible, in nowadays culture that may not be fully possible, to minimize that as much as possible, and that can only be done by government's rules and regulations and interference. Instead of that, what governments do, they many times put toll taxes and taxes on the road, that if you're transferring your product, you have to pay charges. That is also riba. Now, let me take you a different one. When somebody starts an employment contract with someone, you got a job, basically it's a financial contract, and the contract says that I would work for you for a certain number of hours, and whatever you are going to do for that person, and for that the employer is supposed to give you money. That's a financial contract. Now, if that employer, instead of working 8 hours, is wasting 3 hours, now that is a gain. Excuse me. And knowing even beforehand that he would do it, that is darar to the employer. If an employee is not working for 3 hours, that is darar to the employer. So that transaction, meaning the salary that employee is getting, that becomes financial injustice and riba amount. So that should not happen. At the same time, if an employer has committed to pay someone for a certain number of hours and asks for a couple of extra hours and does not pay, that is financial injustice too. That is also riba. So as you can see, Rasul Akram, when provided these, that there are 73 or numerous versions where this is applicable, you start seeing this everywhere. Financial injustice. These are financial injustices. Now, a practice that is rampant and common in societies like Pakistan, and which is, when people go into government service, and the whole government service what percentage of people might be, if we calculate in a country like Pakistan, the total number of people who are in the military and the government service, total taken all together, what percentage of the whole population? I haven't calculated, but I would say maybe it is about 1%, maybe, not more than 2%, maybe. They are about that. And who is really hiring those people? The whole 98% are hiring those people. Who is paying those people? The whole 98%. Because those people who are in the government or military, they don't really make any resources. They don't make any money. They are basically on salary. They don't make any resources for them. So they are the one who are making resources and hired them. Now what happens? These people, government servants and military people, especially their officers class, they are hired by the society. And what they do is, if you look at it, they design right away colonies where land is acquired. There is a CDA colony and the judicial colony and the lawyers colony or university colony, and especially military specializes in this field. And their officer class gets a plot almost every year. Now, what is that? All that in their mind, what they are doing is they are doing everything fair and square. They think that's what they are doing. They are declaring in the community, in their community, and then they are buying the land from people, and then they are giving it to each other. First of all, they were not hired to do that. Secondly, the same land which they usually get a plot for, let's say, 100,000, a week later can be sold at 10 to 15 times of that price, which means that the transaction they did, all those transactions were riba transactions. The same example I provided then when the Minister of Agriculture's guy came to buy a goat, the vendor sold the goat at 80,000 instead of 100,000. This is the same example, that these people in government servant and military, they are acquiring the most precious things in this country, which is the land, and they are acquiring these pieces of land through their official positions, which is, they were not hired to do so. They abuse their positions. And on top of that, these transactions clearly have riba. And because they abuse their positions, it clearly has it clearly has both darar and gharar. The darar, because they buy land at much cheaper price, which could be easily sold at much higher price. That is darar to the whole society. And the second is that they do these things for their own, while they're supposed to take care of rest of the society, all the society. That makes it doubtful. So these transactions have a gharar. So these transactions have both darar and gharar in it. All these transactions are riba transactions, and these societies should stop them. They can easily look at any other, it is easy to blame other societies for different things, but if you look at many other successful societies, these things cannot be done. These things are considered illegal, but they are happening. I'm giving religious justification to those people in Pakistan who are doing this, that these transactions are riba transactions, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save you from those transactions. Next is, out of those transactions, many times what happens, I told you that they buy a property today, and a week later they could just sell the paper. Even the file can be sold. Well, again, like I said, there is already darar accumulating. And just selling the file, it is not even clear if that land or property is ever going to be built or come into form. That is significant doubt. That's why it is not allowed. There is a rule in Islam that in not in all things, but in many things, you cannot sell something that you do not own, you do not possess. So if a piece of land you do not even have, if a house you don't even have, you only show a paper that I have commitment from someone that I'm buying this, and you sell it to someone else, that is Islamically not allowed, because it has too much gharar in it, and also usually darar in it, which is riba. Next, commercial bribery, and I specifically talked about this when I talk about Ayah of Surah Al-Rum, that commercial bribery or gifts which are given are examples of riba, and they should be outlawed in Muslim societies, because if nothing else, because of that reason, that is fundamentally riba, and society should understand it. Now I'm going to talk about something more subtle that people don't pay attention to it. See, I'm talking about so-called semi-government institutions in a Muslim society. Semi-government institutions in a Muslim society. Let me give you an example first in American society. There are many private computer companies here. This is a free market economy. Let's say tomorrow, US government decides that they're going to start a computer company, a computer manufacturing company. That would become, you can say, either a government or a semi-government type of institution, a business. Is that right or wrong? In US, nobody would accept it. Why? Because this is not government's business. And they have their logical reasoning to say that this is wrong. Logical reasoning to say that is wrong. Semi-government or government enterprises are wrong. And there are so many reasons they are wrong, because being government behind these, government would have unusual amount of monopoly and benefit out of that, and other companies would have extreme difficulty competing with them just because the government is behind it. But that happens all the time in societies like Pakistan, where there are so many business sectors where they are owned by government or semi-government, so-called semi-government institutions. And for a private company to compete with them, it is almost impossible. Now that, my friend, is clear examples of darar to the whole society. I told you that the whole government enterprise, they are just military and government usually is just 1 to 2% or few percent. The country is really the rest of the society. Government business institutions and semi-government business institutions are darar to the whole society. Financial harm to the whole society. It is avoidable because they should never go into that. It should be an open market. Islamic concept of economy is open, free market economy. So all government and semi-government institutions are full of riba because of that. I'll give you some real examples of in one area of Punjab I know of, and some years ago, I'm talking about 35 years ago, there was no sugar mill in that area, and every farmer was making gur or brown sugar and selling in the market, and life was fine, and that was the way to do business, until one day in that area in the middle of Punjab, Fauji Foundation opened a sugar mill. Now, that sugar mill investment does not belong to these people who are living there. They are farmers. It does not belong to them. some foreign, meaning the so-called semi-government company, comes and installed a sugar mill. And then a rule was passed that farmers cannot really make brown sugar. They have to sell their crop to this sugar mill. They were forced to. People stopped making gold or brown sugar. And when they were forced to, a lot of injustices were happening. They were people would take their crop to this mill. They would be standing for a couple of weeks in their loaded trucks. Now the crop is drying out. At the end of the day, it is going to be weighed, and then the weight is going to be less compared to when it was taken out. And then even that, the money would not be given to them right away. Farmers would have to wait. Farmers waited weeks and months to get their money back. All those practices utilized by semi-government institution or that business, they are laden with riba. They are full of riba. And now fast forward 20 years, 30 years later, now the whole world is saying that brown sugar is good for you, gold is good for you instead of white sugar. So even in that health ways, it was a bad move. So bottom line is that kind of investment, that kind of arrangement, financial arrangement done by a semi-government company, an example of that are everywhere in Pakistan, are full of riba, and society does not understand and does not pay attention to it, what is happening. And then society expects that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy come to them. How could mercy could come to them when these institutions are doing so much injustice, so much financial injustice to the general public? I'm going to challenge you a little bit more. In Islamic ways of inheritance or in inheritance, when a parents died and the children have to divide their shares, if a person, of course, there are so many wrongs if that doesn't happen, but if somebody is dying, one aspect of that is that if somebody is not getting his or her fair share of the estate in timely fashion, that is financial injustice to that person, and any benefit that the other party is getting is riba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to put that income or benefit in that category because it is zulm to this party. Financial injustice, that is riba. And for the Justice Department of the country to purposefully delay justice in these cases, and many times that happens, they also become a party to this kind of riba arrangement. And then government officials, on top of the land grab, I told you, government officials give themselves perks and benefits, which were never really, when they were hired, society never intended to give them fancy cars and all that business or fancy travel. That is also a riba. I'll give you a practical example. Long time ago, I was a resident in a hospital in Islamabad, which is capital of Pakistan. And in that hospital, people are in a way living in Islamabad that they have no idea of how the rest of the country is. And the capital city is basically formed and funded by rest of the society. But I want to give you an example of how these things are, that people do not understand this. I saw a patient, for example, in those days, and that patient had a nasal cancer of nose. So I went to my professor and said that this is what it is. And my professor wrote a note on letterhead. And on that note, he wrote, refer to Royal Marsden Hospital, England. I didn't even know where Royal Marsden Hospital is, but anyway, I researched. even at that time, I'm talking about almost 40 years ago now, I was amazed that how come in this society, in this hospital, a patient can easily be referred to Royal Marsden Hospital, London, and 10 miles away in a city, Rawalpindi, when I go to that hospital, even Tylenol, acetaminophen is absent. So what is happening in the capital is deep financial injustice to rest of the society, and that, my friend, is riba. That is an example of riba, and whoever is dealing with it is dealing with riba. It is government's responsibility, not an individual. It is government's responsibility to formulate universal rules that are applicable to all of them so that justice would prevail, because injustice is unacceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this category, financial injustice, which is riba, is unacceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And maybe the last example I would use is that nowadays in any country, because most of the world trade happens with US dollars. So for example, in a country like Pakistan, to buy different things from outside the country, they have to utilize dollars. Dollars it becomes the most expensive product for the whole country. But if that whole large amount of dollar amount is being used to fund those products which are used only by fraction of a population, again, the well-connected or the government people, that is financial injustice to the whole society. Because who is going to pay for that? Rest of the society. So that is financial injustice, and that is riba. So as you can see, I thought about these examples, and one could easily look into these examples in so many different ways and provide more. My purpose of doing that was to give you an idea that riba is a term, is a fundamental Islamic fundamental financial concept. And the way it could be understood is that it is financial injustice. And the way to figure this out would be to find if there is any avoidable financial loss, which is darar, or avoidable financial gharar, which is avoidable financial uncertainty or doubt. If any transaction has that, that is riba. So if you are telling your middle schoolers or high schoolers or young person what is riba, you should be saying that the riba is a term used in Islam to describe some problems in a financial transaction or a contract. And those problems specifically are avoidable financial loss or avoidable financial uncertainty. And then you can utilize any example you want to utilize to explain to that person. Of course, I would suggest you utilize example of hadith of Rasul Akram when he talked to Hazrat Bilal Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu and described, it's a brief hadith, but it's a fundamentally very important hadith. And that way you can give a deep message of hadith to that person so that he could formulate his life and avoid any financial injustice and riba. So that's basically the end of a concept of our discussion on riba. As far as I am concerned, I was thinking to design a lecture to talk about concept of basic fundamental of economy in Islam, because Islamic societies struggle, even Muslims struggle, try to understand what type of economy or economic model is really approved by Islam and recommended by Islam. So I am reflecting on that and might design a lecture and deliver it to you if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow me. At the end, I ask you to forgive me for any shortcomings on my side, any mistakes I might have made. I spoke for 5-6 hours, and during this time anybody can, and especially a person like me, can easily make some mistakes. And if you have found that, you can put in your comment sections. And otherwise, I would also suggest that if you have liked any of whatever I have stated, you feel free to forward these lectures to anyone you like. These lectures are open to general public. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take all of us to the right path, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep all of us from the wrong path. Ameen summa ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.